Fresh off his first trip abroad, President Trump returned this week to the turmoil and leaks that have plagued his White House for months. Talk of a West Wing shakeup continue, with Communications Director Mike Dubke resigning and more departures rumored to come. So how can the president keep his agenda on track amid the turmoil? Let's ask Wall Street Journal columnist and Fox News contributor Karl Rove. He served as a senior advisor to President George W. Bush. So, Karl, I want to ask you first about this decision to leave Paris, because you experienced something similar to this in the Bush administration when the president decided not to embrace the Kyoto Protocol. And there was a huge uproar then internationally. What advice do you have for the Trump administration on how to cope with something similar now?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. We've said this is deja voodoo all over again. And one of my White House colleagues at the time, who now teaches out at Stanford, blogged last night that this is another example of what he calls Q-tips. Quantitative, total impact insignificant, total political impact significant. So this is, you're right, this is the right decision to make. The question is the president going to spend the next 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days, he and his administration, explaining this to the American people in detail and giving an optimistic vision of what American leadership in this issue can mean? Or are they going to move on to the next thing? And I think it's really vital that they win this issue. What we had to do was explain why we had something that was better than Kyoto, that we would focus on energy efficiency, and that by doing so we would reduce the absolute level of carbon emissions, but without beggaring our economy. Because at the heart of the sort of the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord is that the nations that commit to it are committing to make energy more expensive. It's going to be more expensive to drive your car, to cool or warm your home, to power the plant at which you work.
Right.
And as a result, that's going to reduce economic growth and the prosperity of virtually every American and every American family. So you got to make the argument.
Right.
You got to make the argument.
Okay, let's move on to the news, the reports of a potential White House shakeup. You wrote about this for us this week. What do you think is the #1 priority for if the president really wants to get this thing back, this White House better organized and disciplined?
Yeah, #1, go out and get the apparatus in place to handle the Russia investigation so that it no longer consumes the time of the communicators at the White House and, to the degree possible, the policymakers at the White House. But you got to get it done right.
Well, okay, what do you do that? Do you quarantine? You get a group that's going to deal with this full time, and any time you get another question about this, you say, sorry, that group is handling it.
That's absolutely right. And it's got to be led by the lawyers, not the communicators. You go out there and put the lawyers in charge, and they're going to restrain the public comments. You put the communicators in charge, particularly Trump likes to talk of his communicators as killers. You're going to stir up a lot of cable TV news, and it's going to be really fun and entertaining to watch, but it will be debilitating to the White House. Compartmentalize this and downplay it.
Okay, well, how do you then control the president? Because one of the keys here has to be the president has to stop tweeting about Russia. Just ignore it. I assume that would be your counsel, but it doesn't look like he's containable on this.
Yeah. Look, he better get himself contained, because most of the problems that are occurring now are problems that he causes, and particularly these tweets. And it's not just the tweets on Russia. A lot of these other tweets are unconstructive to the fulfillment of his agenda or the explanation of it to the American people. Kim Strassel, whom you had on earlier, wrote a wonderful piece on Friday about how all these great things are happening and nobody knows about them. This week, as she pointed out, the Dakota Access Pipeline began moving energy, and that's directly because of the administration. Why didn't we have a White House ceremony where the president symbolically pushed a button to begin the pipeline, and instead it got obscured by tweets? Angela Merkel trolled him, for God's sake. She's on the campaign trail out of Germany, makes a comment that antagonizes him, and he goes after her. What the heck was that about?
I know. Well, that's the way he is, and I'm not sure they can contain it. But let's talk about the staffing issue, because one of the problems with this White House is a lot of the factionalism inside it. Does he need whatever? I know you respect Reince Priebus. I do, the current chief of staff, but I don't think Donald Trump has ever given him the clear authority to lead that White House and discipline White House. Does he need a new one, a new chief of staff?
No, he needs to change his behavior, because if he doesn't change his behavior, the same problems that are occurring today will occur under a new chief of staff. He needs to give Reince Priebus, the chief of staff, the ability to find some low-level leaker and fire him as a message to the rest of the team. He needs to give Reince the ability to discipline somebody who's backstabbing one of his or her colleagues in the West Wing and send a message that that's not tolerated. This has to start at the top. Trump has to be committed. The president has to be committed to saying to people, when you leak against one of your colleagues, you're hurting me and hurting our agenda. And when you are failing to, when you're engaging in warfare, you're engaging in warfare with me.
What about the communications shop here? I mean, Sean Spicer's taken so much abuse, but my sense of things is you could shuffle that shop around, put in a new spokesman, and unless you have more discipline from the top, it's not going to matter.
Absolutely. Look, the communicators are, if you will, an expression of the rest of the White House. They're an expression of whether or not you have a disciplined plan of what you want your message to be, and the message has to be connected intimately with what it is that you want your policy to be. So results matter. So at the end of the day, this is not just about picking what's the nice message for today. It's about picking what is it that we're going to focus our attention on, and how do we then explain that to the American people.
All right. Thank you, Karl. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Paul.
When we come back, the Russia probe ramps up as former FBI Director James Comey prepares to testify before the Senate, and as the House issues some surprise subpoenas of its own.